Hey guys, if you're looking for help with your Amazon business in terms of troubleshooting or strategy, visit sellersessions.com/consultancy or drop me a message to danny@sellersessions.com. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Again, I bring in Anthony Lee. How you doing, mate? You good?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I've been looking forward to this. I've been waiting on this information from you for a little while now, and I know you've been running tests and stuff. So yeah, let's get an update from you. So let's take it from the top. You've now done an article that's been published. I'm going to put this in the show notes. So I've had the same thing with clients. What we're doing about ranking, what about they're doing about URLs and stuff like that. And so we've had a few shows where various different guests have been chipping in, and it's been phenomenal as well. And they've been sharing data. So from your perspective, you've got a load of data now. Do you want to take it from the top, run down some of the details for me?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the premise of the article is just kind of revisiting the often debated topic of like how to do a successful launch and what's working in launches right now, what's not working anymore. I know we have this conversation a lot, and it's like I always say that things don't dramatically change overnight. Most of the time it's a gradual change, but at the same time, Amazon is constantly evolving. So it can get confusing. Like sometimes things work like gangbusters forever and then they don't, and it's slow, gradual change. And then sometimes it really does almost seem like it creeps up on you. So, anyway, so basically, back to the subject. What kind of got me looking into this was, I had just done an article showing, hey, look, we have all this data that shows you that promotions still work, that, you can still use a number of different URLs and you can make it to page one. And here's screenshot. I got tired of doing screenshots and just took like aggregate numbers and was like, look, average position move is a positive, over 20 or over 30 spots. And, this is the average position move to get onto page one. And this is how many people make it to page one. And all the stats looked really good. The problem was there was a number of people that were kind of discussing, well, it doesn't look like these results are staying anymore. And that to me is, probably more important than to getting onto page one. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Is that true? Is that happening? Like, we've got to really dive into that. So I set up a number of different tests, and obviously testing is ongoing, but I also have a very, very large repository of data I can dig through to kind of see. Okay, so I looked manually, mind you, and the only reason I had to do it manually, even though we have all this data in a database, is that there was an extra element that I wanted to look at that we don't currently track. Mm-hmm. And so because of that one extra element, I had to go in and look at all of these manually. And take screenshots and save them to an Excel file and add to them every day. But essentially what I did was kind of analyzed 8 to 10 days out post promotion, just to see like what was happening. And, I went into it honestly thinking, I'm sure we won't see much difference than we saw 6 months ago. This is clearly just the rumor mill, but I started looking at it and, it looked like things were starting to actually shape together to be a little bit different than I had originally anticipated. It looked kind of odd, the behavior. And one of the consistent things that I saw in the behavior was that there was an awful lot of people who weren't, this is what we call sticking the landing, mm-hmm. At the 8 to 9 day mark, which is strange because most people, even with an not perfectly optimized listing should be 2-3 weeks in the position that they land on after blasting before they start seeing a rank adjustment depending on where the organic sales went. So it's like, okay, this is premature on a lot of different listings, and that's weird. So just kind of digging through, and I kept finding that happening. more often than I liked. And I was like, oh, okay, well, what does this mean? Like, we have to start looking. So then it became a matter of, well, let's actually look at the listings. Let's look at their sales history. Let's look at their blast history and find out if there's some, commonalities. Like, where can I connect the dots here? And then looking at it, it was kind of staring me right in the face. It's like, oh, well, a couple things that popped out were, the points that I actually made in the article, that there was unfortunately a majority of people running promotions that were not sticking the landing. Yeah. And the thing that they all had in common were that they were taking some, previous advice given by not just us, but by a lot of people in the industry, that because velocity is king, they should be focusing all of their blast efforts, all of the promotion efforts on a single day, getting as many of those sales as possible all at once. And, as far as all of us knew 2 months ago, that was working brilliantly.
For a period of time. So let's go around, like through the article, it says around 80% of all promotions dropped in rank after 8 to 10 days post-blast. This regardless of the URL type. So we can pick that apart in a moment. It says the amount of rank drop varied wildly. Some only dropped 2 spaces, some dropped much, much more. Number 3, the consistent trend with all these dropped less than 10 places was that they had multiple sales spikes with either waves or with successive solo blasts. So you can explain what they are in a moment. And then number 4, it says another consistent trend was with losing less rank was lower promotional amounts from 70 to 85% discounts seemed to stick higher up the page than the promos of 90% plus. And finally, the consistent trend among 20% that stuck the landing, or in some cases moved even further up in rank, was not consistent spiked sales, but consistent sales growth. So let's...
Not just, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So let's pick these apart. So you're saying around 80% of all promotions dropped after rank after 8 to 10 days post-blast. So for people here, you're saying about the URL type. Explain the URL types that we used in these tests, for instance. Were they storefronts?
Yes. So for the longest time, 90% of all of the promos that go through our system are heat seeker.
Yeah.
Because it's the closest thing you're going to get to, organic looking search, find, buy.
Yeah.
However, we do have the Sidewinder URL, which up until about probably 3 weeks ago was the storefront URL.
Yeah.
However, we changed that because there was a public outcry about storefront URLs, and we looked at it, and they were never performing at the same level as HeatSeeker. But after Amazon's crazy changing this and that and everything, and on top of that, it looked like a lot of saturation from a lot of people using storefronts. It just made sense to say, okay, well, if it's not performing that well and people don't want it anymore anyway, we're going to change that out. Yeah. So we changed that. So looking at the data, we see these 3 types of URLs all used, and it didn't appear that the URL type had any impact on this. We saw, like I said, this is still a small sample size, but in the small sample size, I still saw just as many heat seekers, and then we saw it in the Sidewinders too, dropping in rank. And then in the 20% that did manage to grow, they were both Sidewinder and heat seeker URLs. So it's like, okay, well, the URL type is clearly not the common factor here.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so let's go into the other part of it where I suppose, and I've said this in the past as well, when the position is not sticking, going back, let's retrospectively look at it a couple of months. There are other reasons why stuff wouldn't stick, is because the product wasn't good enough, the pricing was off, there was, didn't make up the ground in organic sales. It just, it was artificially, it was boosted into position, it got the visibility, and then Amazon customers didn't vote with their wallets, therefore they dropped. So that's why it took a little while to understand that adjustment before it started to become more common after the 7th, 8th, 9th day, where people are seeing a drop. Like we've seen people post screen grabs where, they've dropped up to 100 pages and flipped back a couple of pages or gone back to their original position on, say, page 3 before they got to page 1. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, that 100%. Like that's always the way that we looked at it. It's, it's all about optimization. The first few reviews, that review rating, which is really important to people, regardless of how many you have, like how many stars you have, and then the pricing. But despite all that, it's still uncommon for a promotion to lose rank that quickly.
Yes.
And everybody familiar with that particular style of marketing that I've talked to has concurred, like that's fast. And that's the reason why there's been such an outcry of people going, hey, what's going on? My promotions aren't working anymore. It's because it is actually unusual behavior. Now, I would venture that the people who saw tremendous drop were probably the ones that were also highly unoptimized. And there were plenty of people that still remained. In fact, the vast majority still remained above their original position, but they still lost they still lost enough in rank for it to be undesirable in too many cases.
Yep. Makes sense. Okay, so let's get into what is working. So give us some new testing that you've done to mitigate some of these things.
Well, one of the consistencies that I saw in the small sample amongst the listings that were actually gaining or weren't losing too much traction was some of them were really aggressively hitting promo after promo after promo after promo.
Yeah.
And that seemed to do the trick. Like they would drop a little and then, go back up and then a little, but it was always, a correction that brought them back up farther up the page. And those were from obviously, bigger sellers that had a lot more inventory and were able to kind of afford that. And then surprisingly, I saw quite a few, and it was actually not me that first saw it. It was my partner in crime over at Six Leaf Barkus that originally started looking at the Helium-10 sales X-ray graphs.
Yes.
Because they put a 7-day average, and he was like, it's weird. I notice whenever both the lines are closer together, rank consistently grows. And so I was like, that's an interesting observation. Let me look into that. Yeah. And I noticed that why he was seeing that was because the people who were getting consistently incremental growth in sales, right? So like two sales one day, 3 the next, 5 the next, 7 the next, but it was always incrementally growing. Yeah. Those were the guys that like rank didn't seem to slip at all. It was just like that was steady, but it was slower. So it wasn't like, boom, tomorrow you went from position 100 to position 2. It was like, 100, 85, 73, but they would end up making it to page 1 above the fold and just staying there. And that's when it clicked. It was like, okay, so, doing further research, we see that this was, the waves were outperforming the solos, which again goes counter to what everybody was saying 2 months ago, because 2 months ago, that wasn't how it was.
Yeah.
But now it looks like,
well, looking at this graph now, it looks like a waveform, doesn't it? It looks like a sine wave. If you look at the way the humps move, but they're going up in an upward trajectory. So this was based from the 1st of September to the 27th. Yeah.
Yeah. So these were all, people who were promoting it between the 1st and the 19th of September. And then of course they would stop their promos, and after just constantly hitting it or constantly, gradually growing, they would see the average organic sales. Most of these were recorded about 6 to 8 days after the last promo, but a couple of them were recorded only after about 3 days, just because they were constantly running promos, and I wanted to actually capture some organic, data as opposed to obviously if it's a promo, then yeah, they have a spike in sales. Anyway, but yeah, so that growth or that constant hitting like that's working. And specific to the incremental growth of the sales, I remember we have we actually introduced. It's funny too because it was our CEO's idea. He always has like these crazy ideas that it's just like, why would you do that? And then 6 months later, it was like, how did you know that would be important? But like we had this feature called variable code distribution where you could put a differing amount of codes every day of your promotion, and nobody ever uses it because it was not necessary. Yeah. But there were a couple of guys, I guess, who caught on, and when looking at their promotions, you see, oh well, they were far more successful than almost anybody else doing promotions right now. I can't believe they figured it out before we did. So, kudos to Joe for figuring that out well before it was time.
No, it makes sense. So what would be your suggestions now for running launches now in a smarter way, on platform, off platform? See, I have to ask all these questions. Like, you got to understand, even though we're friends, you are from a ranking agency, right? Mm-hmm. So we're based on me having this conversation with you. You're from an agency. Of course, you're going to see it from your perspective. So for the cynics out there, how would this the best way for them to test in isolation on their own and know that they're okay running the campaigns? Because obviously with the storefront URLs, there's been a lot of changes, with what's considered like the drop off and everything else. So it makes people a bit unsure whether they should still use a storefront URL and stuff like that. So what would be your suggestions now to create these launches with a different pattern, but over a longer period of time?
So, I mean, the first thing that I want to say is, despite the fact that, yes, obviously I'm from a launch agency, and I want clients to come and use us when they use a launch agency, but you don't have to use a launch agency.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that if I personally had an unlimited budget, I would just purchase like if I was launching and I wanted to and I didn't have like an invention, some crazy awesome thing that I could just put a listing up and then magically people would just start buying it, which does happen. And I've heard about it happening. And if you're the innovative type that can come up with a product that does that, kudos. Yeah. You don't need my help. But if I'm selling a typical private label product and I have an unlimited budget, then I'm just going to go and like try to buy like 50 full price sales a day for 10, 20 days. Yeah. Because there's no question there, like nothing's going to happen. A purchase is a purchase, especially if I can also orchestrate it being a search, find, buy situation. Basically mimic exactly what would happen if a normal customer were to buy it. But obviously that's expensive, and it's also really hard to do because it's like, where do you go to do that? So for, if you're going to utilize promotions to try and do this, and obviously PPC as well, you have a couple options. You're the king at running PPC, I would say.
I'd defer that to Brian Johnson and Sean Smith, but I'd like to say that I know a bit about PPC. Yeah,
you know a bit about it, and you've done some impressive stuff, like running everything to exact match until you rank on page 1. Like that was brilliant, and I would say like that's a good strategy too. But if you're going to test this, then not using a launch service, you could totally do it with Facebook ads. Yeah. I would say try to test your audience, depending on whether that's an audience that you have built as a custom audience in Facebook or off of interests or however you do it. Try to test your audience to get your percentage discount as low as possible for a couple reasons. One, because we're seeing that the less, the smaller the promotion, the less likely the velocity is to trigger Amazon doing something silly like deciding to mess with your rankings. You'll see a lot less of the crazy, fibrillations in your ranking when you have like smaller promotions. And then 2, you put more money in your pocket that way. So I definitely think if you can get away with it, try to get away with as little promotion amount as possible.
Yeah. So on a calculation front, obviously, people have various different calculations. You take a look at what the sales are over a 30-day period and subdivide that down over the period of days, the giveaways, etc. What are you suggesting here? Is it something like, if you were going to give, for better use of numbers, 20 units a day for 7 days, instead you do 10 units a day for 14 days? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, that was the next thing I was going to say. I would also vary the amount and try to make it a progressive amount. Like me, instead of 20 units a day for 7 days, which is 140 units, I would literally start it at like 5 units, then 10, then 15, then 20, all the way up to 140 over however many days.
Okay, so you'll step
that takes. I would step it up personally, just because, like I said, we saw the best results from that. So make the promo amount as low as you can, step it up. And as far as what URL you're going to use, obviously I recommend HeatSeeker, which means that you would need to use 6-leaf services. But if you're not using a launch service, again, for the URL, the best way to do it, and this only really works if you have like your own community to pull from, the best way to do it is get them to search for it. What I like to do, if I can get somebody to search for it, like let's say your main keyword is garlic press, you want them to search garlic press to find your product, but what if you're not in like 20 pages for garlic press? How I get around that is I create a long tail with that short tail in it. So instead of garlic press, it would be, red stainless steel garlic press, something that makes the list a lot shorter so it's easier to find, and then tell them, hey, put in this super long tail keyword and then go to page 2. I'm right here. Here's a picture of it. That's how I've done it in the past, actually. Short of that, there's a couple other URLs you can play around with. And hidden keywords one with the ASIN on the end is one I know that people use.
Do you have any examples we can add to the show notes for that? Like just taking a random URL to set that up?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. It's actually really easy. You just take a search URL and add and hidden dash keywords equals, and then your ASIN.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. It's super simple.
We'll get that captured in the show notes. Yep. Sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, so people have been, successfully experimenting with that one. That one's actually worked, reportedly quite a bit, and it's one that we use too, and when we see the positive results, they work for that URL just like they work for other URLs. So that's a URL you can use, but again, search obviously is going to be the better way to do it. And then I would also say, while you're running your promotions, you really want to pepper some full price sales in there. Ideally, you could get those to be organic. But if you have a community, let's say you're doing like rebates, or let's say you're just telling your family, like begging them to make purchases, rather than have all that happen at once, which is what a lot of people do, right? Let's say they have like a community of people to draw from, and they can actually pull off getting 10 or 20 sales. Most of the mistake that they make is they get it all at once so they can ask them as quickly as possible for reviews. Now that I get, because you want those first 5 reviews, because it's ridiculous how low your conversions will be when you have 0 reviews. Yeah. But at the same time, you want to spread out those sales, because I think, as I said in the article, one of the triggers to Amazon is not just promo sales, but like ratio of promo sales over normal velocity. And that triggers weird behavior, I think. So, if you're the kind of listing that's only going to do 2 to 3 sales a day on average, normally, according to Amazon, and they do have metrics that predict how many sales you should be getting, and then suddenly you get 200 sales in a single day, 195 of which were a discount. Obviously that's like blatantly obvious that, okay, we understand what's going on there, and then that might trigger some of this weirdness with ranking. So to avoid that, step it up with your promos, and also try to get some full price, whether they're organic sales or not, or you have family help you, or you do some kind of rebate scheme. I would definitely pepper that in there too. And it'll take a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, like when you get those rankings, they should stick. They should stay. You should find a lot more stability that way.
Yeah, well, because you're blending them with organic sales as well. I've found that previously, especially in Europe earlier on this year, it seemed to take a little bit longer to get there from the UK, US, and when I was doing Japan as well. I found in Europe it took longer, but I found that I was using top up. I was looking at organic sales and then topping up with codes as well. So it was a bit of a mix and match. It took longer to get there, but we still went top 5 on the keywords that we went after. But that's a while ago now compared to now. Obviously, things have changed in the last 2 or 3 months as we move at a rapid pace. So let's talk about one more thing, getting clapped on reviews.
Okay.
So review velocity, the situation now with promo codes, with changing. We mentioned Facebook ads, but imagine you're going from a 90% down to a 30%. It's not as desirable. Your ad costs are going to probably increase because the wow factor drops. There it becomes the whole point of doing variable coupon codes, almost like a sweepstake. Do you get a 30% off, 60, 80, 90%? There's some
you could do that too. But when I say variable, I just mean changing the number. Okay. So like me, I'll do like 65% off the whole time, but I'll do like 20 codes tomorrow, 30 the next day, 40 the day after, 50 the day after. So.
And what was your take on the whole review velocity capping? Because obviously there are people out there that do collect these coupon codes that are 70, 80% off. Even if you haven't asked for a review, you're giving away so many. Some of these people actually want to leave a review in some cases. So you may find that the unusual activity there. Have you seen any problems there where people have been caught out with that, for instance? Even if they've not asked for a review, they've got the dreaded warning, you cannot leave a review on this product, blah, 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 or there is some suspicious activity on your account, therefore we're reviewing this ASIN.
I haven't seen, thankfully, any sellers come back and say as a direct result of running, promotions on any platform, they've gotten a warning. But I have seen one or two in like different forums talking about doing deep discount promotions and then having a temporary review block put on their listing.
Yes.
So what I recommend is when you run a promotion, if it's going to be first I have to explain what my experience has been. I've run a lot of promotions at 50% off. I do that honestly just because I know I don't get like a whole lot of velocity there.
Yeah.
But it's a good way to, get some sales. I get a little bit of money off of that and, kind of gets the machine moving. But I've gotten unverified reviews that have stuck from that.
Gotcha.
On the same note, I've done 92% off. And then I've actually gotten a screenshot from a customer saying, I tried to leave you a much deserved 5-star review, but I got this warning. And the warning was, we can't allow you to leave this review because, this listing, they told the customer, the error actually said, this listing, you can't leave a review for this listing because of suspicious review activity. Mm-hmm. Which made me think, oh my gosh, my listing got review blocked. But then I did the little URL to check, and there was no review block.
For the audience, what is the URL to check?
You'll have to put it in the show notes. But there's a URL you can use as long as you don't do it from your account. You can do it from somebody else's buyer account, and you look at your ASIN through the URL. It'll say it's a yes or no. It'll say whether or not you can leave reviews for that listing or you can't.
Okay.
So that's how you check if you're blocked. And I checked and I wasn't blocked, but it was weird because the message from Amazon to that customer made it look like it was. And then I realized, oh, that's just the message they're sending to people who bought at over 90%. They don't want to let these people who only paid $1 for my product, leave a review, but the people at 50% were allowed. My suggestion would be if you do any kind of a deep discount, and I would say probably anything greater than 60%, hopefully you have a feedback service that lets you exclude anybody that bought at a promo. I would definitely not follow up with them with a review request, only because if the velocity, like we've seen plenty of times, people run lots and lots of promos, no problems. And then every now and again, somebody runs a promo and then they're like, whoa, I have this temporary block. A friend of mine recently got a temporary block for like 2 weeks. And it went away, I guess probably after the algorithm saw that things normalized. But if you run a lot of deep discount promos and for whatever reason, a whole bunch of people just decide they love your email sequence and they're actually going to go ahead and go and leave you a review, and too many of them try at the same time, Amazon views that as suspicious, and you could get that temporary review block, which is a pain.
Yeah.
So just don't ask them. Just leave them out of your sequence.
Cool. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
No.
Well, I think we covered a lot
that's all I got.
Right. So what's the best way people can get in contact with you?
Definitely recommend, well, first find me on the unofficial Anthony Lee Facebook page. I post things on occasion there that make some sense. And then beyond that, you can always hit me up at Anthony@sixleaf, or check out the sixleaf.com blog,
no worries.
Which is where this article is.
Yeah. Indeed, guys, thanks for joining us. Anthony, thanks for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.